everybody. Welcome to another episode of Purple Insider. Matthew Coller here. And the first words in the chat from Ben, please no more Rodgers. I'll try. Ben, I will try. I did an entire podcast episode earlier today. If you want to go listen to it with Will Parkinson, breaking down from a Jets perspective of what Rodgers has left in the tank and whether my guy Will would have liked him to go to the Vikings if he likes that fit or likes how Rodgers looks. So I'll do my best. That's the best I can tell you because there probably will be questions and comments about Aaron Rodgers that I may have to talk about. So we can get into more of who the backup might be as we go along in the conversation. Some of you want Joe Flacco. Okay, that's fine with me. I saw Ryan Tannehill's name floated. If he's still around, that's all right. You can talk me into any backup quarterback for JJ McCarthy, but it's backup quarterback for JJ McCarthy, not anyone else playing quarterback. If you want Drew Lock, if you want Sam Howell, sure. Whoever you want, whoever you like is my favorite other quarterback for the Vikings, not named Aaron Rodgers. So we can get into that as well. But we do have some Vikings headlines for the day that I want to go through. First of all, Garrett Bradbury was released by the Vikings. I know the most common question about Garrett Bradbury, well, there's two common questions, really. The first one is, well, if they could trade Ed Ingram, then why couldn't they trade Garrett Bradbury? But the way that trades work is usually if a team knows that you have to get rid of a player, they're not going to give you anything for him. And I think that that's probably the case here, where with Ed Ingram, the Vikings did not have to get rid of Ed Ingram. They had to have someone come get him from them. They could have kept Ed Ingram as a backup for next year, but then, okay, well, that's the price you're going to pay, then fine, and we'll do it. But with Garrett Bradbury, the minute that they signed Ryan Kelly, that was it for Garrett Bradbury, and everybody else can figure that out along with you, that that's going to be the case. So rather than trying to, if you're the New England Patriots and you want Garrett Bradbury and they've been connected to him a couple of times, rather than them going out and saying, we'll give you draft capital, and that's a team that's rebuilding and wants to hang on to their draft capital, well, we'll just wait and then we'll make the biggest offer for him financially because they have a gajillion dollars in cap space still, even though they've been a big spender. That was the most likely reason, I think, that it worked out differently, where the Vikings still had Ed Ingram under contract, under his rookie deal. And with Bradbury, even though it's not a huge expense, it still would be an expense. And if a team thinks, well, we could get him for $950K if we sign him, or whatever, it's the minimum for a veteran of his experience, why take the contract that he's already on? Why not just take the cap space or the cap hit that we want to give him, which might not be very high at all? So that's just my guess. I'm sure if they could have traded him, they would. And the same was, we kind of had this conversation with the Sam Darnold and franchise tag him and trade. Like, if someone offered it, then they would have taken it. You can't force people to trade for your stuff. So the most common other question is, why would they do a post June 1st? Now, there's a couple of different reasons you might do a post June 1st. The one that I see the most is they must have something cooking, and, okay, we'll get into that. Maybe they do. It was a small amount of money that wouldn't have prevented them from doing anything. So if we're trying to make Garrett Bradbury post-June equals Aaron Rodgers is coming here, or there's some huge trade on the way, I think that's a pretty big stretch, because the 2025 cap hit for Garrett Bradbury, if they released him, wouldn't have gotten in the way of any structure of anything that they're going to do. If they're going to bring in Aaron Rodgers, they weren't going to let that get in the way. My only guess would be that because they don't need the cap space right now, because the thing is, if you post June 1st, you don't get it till then. So they don't need it right now, that $1 next year isn't worth $1 today. So think about it this way. I went to lunch with the wife, right? And let's just say we paid $75 for lunch, and it's a really nice lunch. And what if they came to me and said, okay, instead of paying for this $75 lunch today, if you pay it next year, you only have to pay $60 for it. Well, that's kind of how this works, where because the cap is going to go up, the dead cap that goes along with Garrett Bradbury for next year is going to be worth less dollars on the cap. It's going to be worth a smaller percentage on the cap. So that's one reason that they could be doing it this way. That's actually really the only reason that I can think of, other than that you carry over cap space and it doesn't really matter. So that they have all this cap space this year, and if they don't use it, then they can carry it over. Uh, the other thing is that because they have about $32 million in cap space now on overthecap.com, once you start adding up like the things that they still need to do, they will need to sign a draft class, which I know it's going to be a small draft class, but you still need to sign it. And they need a backup quarterback that will cost them some money. If Joe Flacco is showing up here, then he's going to want $8 million or something like that. And you're signing him to a 1-year contract. And then you're still looking at other positions on this roster that are open from a depth perspective. You're still looking for depth guys to bring in at a number of different spots. Maybe there's another interior offensive lineman, the left guard position could be one, or wide receiver could be another one. They were supposedly somewhat at least in on Cooper Kupp. So if you're looking at a Keenan Allen, a Tyler Lockett, or whoever else, and it adds up pretty quickly, and all of a sudden you're more at like 15 and you want to have a buffer. See, this is life with cap space, folks. You want to have a buffer where if you're going into the season and you need to make a mid-season trade, that you can do that because you've got the cap space and you could bring somebody else's cap hit in. So they may want to just be able to do that and have $15 to $20 million hanging around in case there's a big star who needs to be traded. And think about what happened last year with the amount of teams that were really bad. Now, the trade deadline didn't turn out to be insane, but there were a lot of teams that were really, really bad. And so they were able to, to look at these tanking teams that might be trading people and at least have some options there. And that's what you could do if you have cap space. Is, all right, this team, they're getting rid of their big star. They're losing. They don't want to keep him on the roster. So can you go trade for him? Well, you can only do it if you can fit him in the cap, because you can't go over the cap in the season. You have to stay underneath the cap. So if you're trading for someone, it gives you options to not have to redo their contract or whatever is part of the deal. You could just take on their money. And that would be maybe another potential reason to carry over cap space. So it's good to actually have it. You don't have to spend all of it right now. And maybe there could be, like, when you look into the future, maybe there's free agents for next year that they have their eye on and think, well, if we carry over it next year, then that'll cut into some of these big contracts that the cap hits have gone up. And maybe there's some free agents that we think are coming up that could be interesting. Like, there's other reasons than, ooh, the next big trade is on the way, or Rodgers. Those things could happen. I'm not saying they're not going to. It's just that we can't really equate them having a little bit of cap space meaning for sure, or June 1sting a guy meaning for sure that there's a big move around the corner. But it does give them the space and the flexibility for them to potentially have a big move around the corner. And this is the new life you live as long as Aaron Rodgers stays out of here. As long as it's JJ McCarthy, that is indeed the new life you live. So I can get your questions in just a minute. So keep throwing them in a chat and I will run through questions and comments. There's a lot of space for that tonight since we don't have a breaking news story. Jeff Okudah, by the way, visiting the Vikings. They are one of those teams that likes to take former first-round draft picks, bring them in, give them a look. Jamin Davis was last year's. Marcus Davenport was kind of this, who had like a little bit of something here or there, but had really kind of been a bust first rounder or not a successful first-round pick. There's a lot of teams that do this. Kansas City likes to do it. Dallas just did it with a bunch of guys. It's a common strategy, but I mean, Jeff Okudah has just not had a good career so far. He had that one good game against Justin Jefferson, and maybe that's part of why. I mean, this always happens, right? I don't know. This is a deep cut. Does anybody remember Anthony Zettel? The Vikings signed Anthony Zettel because he had one monster game against them in, I want to say, like 2020. He had a big game against the Vikings, and then he was in the next camp after he had gotten cut and hadn't really done anything. All the time this happens in the league. Well, this guy had a really good game against us. Maybe something's there, but Jeff Okudah should not, if he comes to the Vikings, be considered anything more than just a long shot. He has not worked out. Great college player, but at no point in the NFL has he shown that he could be a consistent, even average player. Otherwise, with his talent, he would be on a team, locked into a contract. Teams never let it go that they love somebody in the draft. So as far as ideas go, it's fine, but I just don't generally believe that these work very often. Maybe somebody can give me examples of times where bringing in a complete random bust who was a first rounder didn't work out, then suddenly you snap the fingers and the guy is totally different. It just doesn't happen very much. So I'm not against it, but yeah, bring him in for camp, see what happens. But I wouldn't put a lot of eggs in the basket with somebody like that. Rondale Moore visited another team. How dare you, Rondale Moore? How dare you? Did they not bring Rondale Moore in on the really nice summer days? Because there's been a couple days. Today was really nice. And like 3 days ago or 2 days ago was really nice, but not the 2 days in between. So maybe if you brought Rondale Moore in the wrong day, he could be like, forget this. And then he goes to Chicago. It's really nice there today. He's going to sign there. I'm just joking, but it seems that Rondale Moore is on a Rondale Moore tour, and I wish him the best on that. I still like him as an idea, but I'm not over the moon about him as an idea. He had the serious injury, and on paper, he looks like a Brandon Powell type of player, which is okay to have, but it's certainly not game changing. You can draft a guy like that. He just has never really become that lightning type of player, that big play threat. If they do it, I'm okay with it because, if he gives you 40 catches or 30 catches, a handful of handoffs, some kick returns or something, like that's nice. But if they lose out on Rondale Moore, I don't think they have to move the franchise to St. Louis. So we'll see if he signs here or somewhere else. Don't tell him I said that. Maybe that would turn the tides. And where the cap space goes, we kind of went over that a little bit, but I just think that it will go in filling these depth spots. And the one thing that they have not been able to do as a team, as a franchise, in the last 6-7 years since Kirk Cousins came here was to make that last key signing that at the time, and this is the Eric Wilson signing, it's maybe even the Jordan Mason trade, like that one extra person at a position. If it's Rondale Moore, maybe it's him. Give him that $1 extra million, that $2 extra million, so you get the guy and not somebody else. It's always been because they have been up against the cap. Well, you can't really afford it, so let's just bring in somebody, whoever, kind of off the trash heap, but there are still free agents remaining. So I did want to run through just off that athletic top 150 list, a couple of guys that could still be of interest potentially. I'm not saying that I know there's interest, but just if you told me the Vikings were interested, I would say, okay, Tevin Jenkins is at the top of the list here for sure. There has been no reports of the Vikings being interested in Jenkins, but he is basically the only above average offensive lineman left on the market after Mekhi Becton signed a very reasonable deal with the Los Angeles Chargers, who I think are going to be a good team next year running the football. I mean, no doubt about it with that offensive line. But with Becton off the market, Tevin Jenkins is really the last guy there. Rasul Douglas is another one who's a corner, played for the Bills. He's 30 years old. I like the idea of another veteran corner coming in and competing and filling out this cornerback room because I like Mekhi Blackman from 2 years ago, but it's 2 years ago and he played like 400 snaps. So I think another veteran, and the Isaiah Rodgers deal is good. But if you can add another 30-year-old, somebody who's in the Stephon Gilmore type of mode, and maybe Stephon Gilmore will be that guy and he will sign in August. I guess we'll see. He was fine for them last year, but maybe if he's not starting, he doesn't, or isn't playing all the time, he doesn't want to do it. So Rasul Douglas, Keenan Allen, you guys know I've been interested in. Amari Cooper, a little less so, but I guess is wide receiver 3. Asante Samuel's name comes up all the time. One of those guys that I think if they wanted him, they would have maybe already done this because he's younger and he should have had a lot of attention. Maybe he's holding out for something. I don't know. Brandon Scherf has always been a right guard and Will Fries is a right guard, but man, If we could just get him or Will Hernandez to play for the Minnesota Vikings, it would justify all of our conversations through all the years where those guys have come up. Tyler Lockett. Yep. I'm in. I'm into Tyler Lockett. Calais Campbell. Why not one more? Elijah Moore is another one. Elijah Moore is another one who's interesting to me. Wide receiver. He's like 26 years old, total underneath guy, a gadget player from last year. Some of you have mentioned wanting Tyler Conklin back. Mike Hilton, the corner from Cincinnati. I know Amir in the comments has mentioned Jedrick Wills as a guy to take a shot at left guard to come in and compete. I'm okay with that. Akello Weatherspoon kind of killed the Vikings last year. So the point is that there are a number of players who are still on the market that are proven good NFL players and just have not found spots. Dalton Reisner might be another one, and they have some places that they can use the cap space. One more thing, and I want to just say this is total tongue in cheek, but since the internet is still ablaze with Aaron Rodgers, just a PSA here that if you have seen a Vikings coach, executive, or free agent, please call 1-800-PURPLE and let me know of the location. Let me know that they're safe. Let me know that someday they will be available to talk in public again. Podcast appearances, TV, radio, print interviews, press conferences, anything that these free agents and executives and coaches for the Vikings might be able to do. If they're out there and they could possibly speak to anyone, just call 1-800-PURPLE and let me know, because none of us have seen any of them. I'm just kidding. But every day that goes by that the Vikings don't talk to anyone at all, none of them, is like another day where the Rodgers stuff continues to be the fuel and the flame. And people ask me constantly, well, what's going on with this? What's going on? I mean, I don't know what to tell you. I don't know what to tell you. They tell us when press conferences are and we go to them. But aside from that, I don't know. I mean, it seemed at first like logistical type of thing, and I'm sure that's what we'll be told, but I don't know that Kevin O'Connell has gone 2 weeks without doing any interviews or media ever. And I don't know that there's any team in the NFL who has ever spent this much money, signed this many players, and had such an exciting offseason for their fans and been nowhere to be found. I don't think that's ever happened. That's what makes me continue to think that the Aaron Rodgers discussion will dictate when it is that we see and hear from any Vikings players or brass, and we'll all just continue to wait and have this conversation until then. But for now, they remain on the back of milk cartons, I guess. Anyway, again, just joking around, but anytime now is fine. All right. Blueberry Sanchez wants Joe Flacco to the Vikings. Yeah, I can't say that Joe Flacco excites me at all. But when we look at the remaining list of backup quarterbacks, I know you guys love quarterbacks. Everybody loves quarterbacks. I don't mean that like in a derogatory way. Everybody loves talking about quarterbacks. It's what we do here. But I'll continue to say, if it's Drew Lock, if it's Joe Flacco, if it's Sam Howell, it's all the same thing. If it's Brett Rippon even, it's all the same thing. It's all the same thing. At this point, there's no difference making backup quarterback. I'm completely against Jameis Winston. I don't want any person who is going to make noise. If it's Ryan Tannehill, that's totally fine. I would prefer somebody that has maybe experience in the playoffs or has played before. Joe Flacco would be that guy. Ryan Tannehill would be that guy. Whatever. That's fine with me. I know Sam Howell really lost himself probably some money last year when he got into a game when he was playing for Seattle and then just completely fell apart and wasn't prepared. So that probably hurt him. Drew Lock had his moments. Seems like a good vibes guy, but I mean, I don't know that for sure. Maybe they like him. Maybe they don't. I don't want any backup quarterback who's going to draw any attention to himself. It's a go about your business, be ready if they need you. That's why I was always fine with Sean Mannion. No, of course I didn't want Sean Mannion to play any games, but it was like, whatever, man. If Kirk Cousins gets hurt, the season's over. And guess what? That's what happened in 2023. So the same thing goes here. At this point in the game, there are no backup quarterbacks that are going to be able to save you, with Cooper Rush signing with the Baltimore Ravens. The other thing with that position is because it does cost some money, And I'm saying this through gritted teeth. And you know what I'm going to say? The comp picks may play a role in this. They might be waiting for Cam Robinson to sign to see how much he signed for, to see what they can spend, to make sure they keep the comp picks. It is a factor. I just try not to figure out what kind of factor it is. It's been asked that about Cam Robinson and guard. He's just not a guard. It's just not going to happen. He is not a guard. That's just not how he plays. He is a very tall player. Like he doesn't get down low. He doesn't have a quick twitch off of the line of scrimmage. He's not explosive. It's been one of the worst run blocking tackles in the NFL. He is purely a pass protecting tackle. And I think that teams aren't paying him because of what they saw at the end of the year. I mean, at the end of the year for the Vikings, he was terrible. His last 5-6 weeks, he was honestly on the level of some of the tackles of the past, the Andre Smiths, the TJ Clemmings. Like numbers wise, he was giving up the same amount of pressure. The Matt Khalils of those guys, he really, really struggled down the stretch. And it's all on tape. And I imagine that there's no team that's going to come out and say, oh yeah, here's, $25 million a year after that type of performance. And not only that, but it's not like he kind of left the best impression in leaving Jacksonville. He got benched for Jacksonville. It just, but he's definitely not a guard. And I don't think he's going to make a ton of money in free agency. Stephanie wants to know, good to see you, Stephanie, who's a backup center. That would be Michael Juergens, who they drafted in the 7th round last year. I got the idea that they liked what they saw from Michael Juergens because he was active. I never asked anybody, I will eventually, about it now that he's in line to play if Ryan Kelly has any injury issues, which, I mean, we could sort of pencil in the possibility of Ryan Kelly missing some games at some point. And if he does, then Michael Juergens will be the next man up. So he'll get a little more attention this time around, but he was an active player over Dan Feeney, who is a veteran that's been in the league for some time. Bradley, can Walter Rouse play center? We've got Walter Rouse doing a lot of different things these days, but I think he is much more of a guard for the future for them to move inside. Truly, he's a tackle, but there's just no room at the inn at tackle where they brought in a proven guy in Justin Skol, and they have 2 of the best tackles in the league. So he's a prospect that they like, but I think they like him at guard. And he is a good athlete. He was a basketball player and had a very good preseason. So I think he's somebody that they like. He may get into a competition at guard. I don't know that. But at very least, he's good depth if they need him. But he's not somebody that you're moving all the way into center. That's going to be Michael Juergens. Edwin says, how far can the Vikings trade back and still have Gray Zabel available? I was draft simming today, and I think that there's a lot of attention on interior linemen these days. And this is what makes it hard, because in a rational world where you do a draft simulation on PFF's website, they're going to factor in the positional value in a traditional way in their draft board. So they're going to have, those wide receivers pushed up, those tackles pushed up, edge rushers, and maybe even defensive tackles to some point. But every draft sim I do, I can get Gray Zabel in the second. I can get a lot of times like Derek Harmon at 24. I don't know though, because the league, everyone's talking about interior pressure and interior blocking. And there's so many teams that need offensive line that Gray Zabel might go a lot higher than people think, or maybe it'll stay a little more traditional with the actual draft value. But I think when guards are getting paid like Aaron Banks or like Will Fries, these big contracts, the ones that we saw for last year, that there's a very good chance teams see it as a worthwhile investment now to bring in somebody like Gray Zabel on a fairly high draft pick. So, I mean, as far as like your mock drafters and your draft simulators, and there's the mock draft database, Arif Hassan does his consensus draft board. I'm sure they're all going to have Gray Zabel a little farther back than where the Vikings are, but I also wouldn't be shocked if there's one position the teams reach on, and it is the interior offensive line. But he would be very high on my list. Very, very high on my list for the Vikings, for sure. Kerpluppy says, how much money do you want to keep on the books for something like midseason acquisitions to cover injuries? I was thinking somewhere around $15 million. maybe even a little bit more than that. So if you have a player out there who's got a fairly big cap hit, if it's a star, then you could just go out and get them and you don't have to make a whole lot of adjustments. And yes, injuries are a factor. You have to bring in other players. And remember last year at the end of training camp, they signed Stephon Gilmore. Like, you never really know which one of these guys is going to just hold out. I don't mean hold out in the traditional sense, but kind of wait and wait and wait. And then all of a sudden it gets into camp. It's like, oh, wait, I need a job. And then they sign him last minute. And Stephon Gilmore, what a great last minute signing. I mean, he played how many, like 800 snaps on a team that had a top 5 defense last year. They always want to keep at least a good chunk if you can. In the past years, you couldn't, but now you can. St. Perp, possibility of maybe interest in Tevin Jenkins, high risk, high reward. Yeah, that's the one thing I just don't know about Tevin Jenkins. It seems like everyone is afraid of his injury history, and they should be. He's never played 1,000 snaps, but you do get to a point where if you sign the guy and he plays, if you have a good backup option, if he plays 700 snaps, like, okay, that's still worth the money. Like 700 snaps of Tevin Jenkins for a 1 year or 2 year contract or something is worth it, but you don't want to be doing that with guard. And I think I'm guessing some fear when it comes to somebody like Tevin Jenkins, because he's way too good of a player to still be on the market versus the type of guys who have been let go before. So, yeah. Anyway, Alexander's guessing Rondale Moore failed the physical. Well, I don't know. I mean, we don't know. He might have come here and had a conversation. They told him how much they might pay, and that was it. And then he went somewhere else and tried to find out how much they might pay. So, Alex says, if the Vikings made a big trade with the cap space, this is a way to get me to talk about the trades. This is the way, Alex. If the Vikings did make a good big trade with the cap space, which position would you target? Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I have an obsession with teams that have 3 weapons, and I think you guys can appreciate it. It's been going back forever. I remember arguing with people about Antonio Brown when Antonio Brown was having a crazed meltdown, and I was like, I don't know, I think I'd still do it. And it's like, no, you can't still do it. And then he won the Super Bowl with Tampa Bay. I'm like, see? That wide receiver 3 position, my brain was harmed by watching Laquan Treadwell get targeted on 4th down by Kirk Cousins in 2018 while he had Adam Thielen and Stephon Diggs. And so I'm always thinking, one more wide receiver would not be a bad idea, but it might be on the defensive side for making a trade. Where would that go? Corner, right? Corner would have to be the place. That's why all of you like the fake Sauce Gardner thing is probably corner, because if you could put Byron Murphy together with somebody really good, then I think, I think your secondary would be unbelievable if that was the case. This is a good list here from Nick. Ross Blacklock, Jawan Williams, we brought it. Yeah, Jalen Rager. Thank you, Nick. Yes, you're making my point exactly on bringing in somebody like Jeff Okudah. Like, they've done this before and have not really seen it work out. Julio says, can it be possible the Vikings see something in Brett Rippon? Yeah, no, they like Brett Rippon. I don't think that that's fake. I don't think that that's fake that they like Brett Rippon. It's just that when he's played before, it hasn't really gone all that well. I think what you would like is to have somebody who's been through it in the league. Someone like Joe Flacco, who has just gone through the ringer of the NFL. He's won a Super Bowl. He just knows how it goes and can help with the game planning, help with the understanding of defenses, help with just the day-to-day stuff. Because I don't think any of us really can put ourselves in the shoes of a quarterback and the mental and physical exhaustion that is an entire NFL season. Just look at how gassed these guys are, how many hits you take, how many defenses you face, how much criticism there is, and all that sort of stuff. Somebody there who's been through it, I think, could be pretty helpful to JJ McCarthy. I mean, not that he needs somebody to hold his hand. It's just, you always prefer that. I think every team with a younger quarterback, even like Carolina last year with Bryce Young, that guy was going through it. He wanted to get traded out of there and they're benching him. And then he's only going back in because Dalton hurt his thumb. But Dalton along the way is kind of that good soldier, veteran guy. And it's just one of 100 examples of young quarterbacks with veteran backups that you like. Ben says Rouse at left guard, draft a left guard, Brandel in year 2 as the starter, or just the competition. How about that? Just the competition. And you could draft one in the third. Tate Ratledge is a guy who's interesting to me from Georgia, did really, really well at the combine. So let's say you draft one in the third round, and then you have a full out competition, Blake Brandel, Walter Rouse, and draft pick X, and whoever wins, wins. That's another thing we've not had. When was the last time the Vikings had a serious competition for one of those spots? Nick Easton versus Alex Boone, 2017 training camp. I haven't remembered a serious competition. It was supposed to be Jesse Davis versus Ingram, but they had already decided they were giving it to Ingram, and Jesse Davis was pretty banged up at that point and just couldn't really move. So in an actual in earnest day-to-day rotating first team reps, best man wins left guard competition, let's go. Let's go. That's a good one from Aaron. Sign Tevin Jenkins and make your training staff work overtime. Oh, buddy, they're going to need to add like 8 people to the training staff if they do that. They've already got the Aaron Jones, the Jonathan Allen, the Javon Hargrave. There's a lot of guys that they are putting trust in this training staff to be able to work through that are over 30. I mean, some of the injuries are just bad luck. If you tear a pec or something, we've seen guys come back from that. It's just one of those, I don't know, a bad break for you, but it's not like something that you expect to impact somebody long-term. So there's all sorts of different injuries, but when you hear someone had a back issue, which I think was what Tevin Jenkins' problem was, that's where you do get concerned. Like, back injuries are not something that usually go away all that easily. The nightly Adam Thielen question, he re-signed with Carolina. So as much as everybody likes bringing back old Viking players, he is not going to be doing that. Kerpluppy says Pat McAfee was talking about Sam Darnold's contract being essentially a 1-year contract. Thoughts? It is. Yeah. When you look at it on paper, really the full guarantees only go for 1 year. It's about $37 million. This is exactly the contract that I was talking about if the Vikings wanted to bring him back. In fact, it was almost to a T. I think I threw out there 3 years. This is because I asked an agent about what he would do with Sam's contract, but that's not the point. That is kind of what I'm supposed to do. But what was told to me as a guess for Sam Darnold was 3 years, 120, and it would be more like the actual fully guarantee, more like what the franchise tag is. And that's basically what it is. The little below the franchise tag, which is 41, I think. And he's going to get like 37. So it's a fake kind of 3-year contract that they can get out of after one. Had the Vikings wanted Sam Darnold or him wanted to be here, then that would have been exactly the type of deal he would have done. And if you look at the cap space that they have now, this was also kind of the point, was they could always work this out to make it fit. Like they could still build this same exact roster with what Seattle is paying Sam Darnold. It's just, did everybody want to do it? Like, did Sam Darnold want to come back? And now it did come to mind with all this discussion about Aaron Rodgers, did come to my mind. Like, wait, did they want Sam Darnold back, but he didn't want to do it? And he wanted to go to Seattle and knew that that was an option? I don't know, because the reporting was that they kind of did. And I got the impression that they kind of didn't and wanted to be polite and make everybody think, yeah, oh yeah, we're considering it. But maybe I'm wrong. I mean, maybe if they're considering somebody else, they did try to get Sam Darnold to stay. I don't know. I'll ask someone the next time I see them, which is going to be sometime, definitely. They have to, Kevin O'Connell has to do a sit down conversation at the owners' meetings. Every coach does. So that's 2 weeks from now. So at very least we'll know then. At very least we will know then. But until then, can't ask that question. But yes, Sam Darnold, I mean, look, Sam Darnold was never, after those last 2 games, going to get some sort of $50 million a year contract. Everybody saw what happened, but it's a reasonable contract for someone. It's very reflective of Baker Mayfield, very reflective of Geno Smith. It's similar to those where they were pretty sizable if the guy stays for 3 years, but if he doesn't, then it is more of a 1-year contract that they can get out of if he does fall apart. So a good contract for Seattle and a good contract for Sam if he proves it. And everything is, I mean, think about the NFL. Who isn't year to year anyway in the NFL? There's like 10 players who aren't really year to year with their contracts. Most of them are. Skywalking McCarthy. Linval Joseph is our run stopping defensive tackle. We got to come up with other players. Linval Joseph's like as old as I am, I think. Seriously, I think he's like 37. So that I don't think that he can really be Linval Joseph anymore. I shot you 99. Where does Harrison Phillips land on the depth chart with 2 new DTs being plugged into a 3-4 defense? I just don't think of this as a 3-4 defense. I just think of it as whoever should be out there on a particular play. It's not like this defense has, I mean, you can think of it as Van Ginkel is a true old school outside linebacker, and he is. He is a throwback to an old school 3-4. And the way they had it set up last year with Tillery and Jonathan Bullard on the field, it was a little bit more of that 5 type of guys up front. And, you know, you have the outside linebackers. So, but the 3-4 just doesn't really exist in the same way that it used to. So I look at it as they're going to put whoever on the field is right for the situation. On first down, it'll be Harrison Phillips and probably Jonathan Allen. I think he's more of a 3-down type of player. And then you're going to see second down and long, Javon Hargrave, Jonathan Allen, maybe Harrison Phillips is off the field. See, when Harrison Phillips got here, he only, I think, played like 500 snaps a year and was more of a run stuffing type. So when he's, I think, in a situation where the other team is clearly going to pass, they will take him off the field, put Hargrave and Allen both on the field, and maybe rotate some of those other guys in. That's how I think it's going to work. Is maybe Allen will play more of 3 downs, but they could also bring back Jonathan Bullard. They could also have Jalen Redmond on early downs, play like first down and 10 or third and short. He was pretty good at getting into the backfield and stopping the run. So they've got a lot of options there. And that's always Brian Flores and what he's going to do. He's going to put on guys on the field that are the best for that very specific situation and look and team, which they haven't been able to do at that position because they just didn't have guys. So they were saying, Jonathan Bullard, go play 700 snaps. And that was a lot for him. Or Jerry Tillery, go play all the snaps. That was just a lot for those guys to handle. But I think what we'll see is Phillips, in the last couple of years, it's the same story with Phillips, where beginning of the season, middle of the season, he's great. And then he gets worn down. Maybe this year they will not have that happen. Draft Luther Burden, problem solved. I'm down. I've been sold on that. I've been sold on that idea. If you try to sell me on more weapons, I will say, yep. I mean, you guys all remember 3 deep. You know it. You know how effective it was. If they have an opportunity based on all the things that they've done to bring in Matthew Golden or Luther Burden, the 2 wide receivers who could be there, it does a couple of different things. Number one, it just adds another problem for opponents. And think about, like, Seattle drafted Jackson Smith-Njigba when they had DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. You are allowed to look a year or 2 down the road. And when we look even into next year, there's a possible suspension for Jordan Addison. And when we look 2 years, there's a decision on Jordan Addison of whether to pay him. And as of right now, it's early in the offseason. Going to have to make it through a full one first in order for him to end up getting that big contract eventually. Like, he's got to play well. He's got to keep his nose clean off of the field. They got to be sold on the guy to give him an extension. And even if they did, and your 3 wide receivers are all really excellent, I mean, that's just more help for JJ McCarthy. And the more help you can give JJ McCarthy, the better you can do. JP North, why do you think they're taking so long on the quarterback decision? Give us some theories. I don't know. I mean, it's not like they didn't know that Aaron Rodgers was available. When did the Jets announce that they were moving on from him? It was weeks ago. And maybe it's a very hard decision. I don't know. How long did it take all of you to ask your significant other to marry you or something, right? Like that, a while, I guess. I guess you thought about it pretty deeply. Maybe that's what's happened here. Is there's a lot of meetings and a lot of conversations. Maybe somebody's trying to be talked out of something. Well, I mean, you're asking me to give theories. I mean, all those are theories that make sense. The reporting is that it's all on KOC. I find that tough to fully believe, don't you? That everyone's just like, hey, do whatever you want. We have no opinions whatsoever. I'm bringing Aaron Rodgers here. It's all you, pal. That seems like it's unlikely. So maybe it's just ongoing conversations within the building about whether to do it or not. Clearly, they're talking about it. Otherwise, we would have seen them out and about. And there's been multiple reports that they are talking about it, not even just within The Athletic and their two reporters who have been banging the drum. So that would be my guess, is that it's something that you got to have many layers of plans for. How much you're going to pay him. It could be that. It also, I mean, it just could be like Aaron and his list of demands. Which friends of Aaron Rodgers do you have to sign? If Aaron Rodgers comes here, there's going to be some. Is it going to be Alan Lazard? Does he have to be a Viking, or you can't do it? Does he want 2 years and they're trying to talk him into 1 year? That could also be a thing. Like, it could be a negotiation issue. I don't know what is taking so long. But until we do this thing, then we're still going to sit in the dark until there's either a JJ McCarthy declaration of quarterbackness, or there's somebody who comes out and talks and says, yeah, he's our guy, or Aaron Rodgers is signed. Like, we're not going to know. We're just going to sit and wait. Go Wolves. Wolves have been playing well lately, haven't they? Tyler Booker fills in so nice at our left guard spot. He played left guard at Bama next to a stud left tackle like he would with Darisaw. Yeah, Booker hurt his stock for sure at the combine, but that also might be something that ends up helping the Vikings potentially. They say that they love Tyler Booker and his tape, but then he goes to the combine and doesn't do very well. I mean, you're going to stick with the tape more than the combine. And if you love his play style, his physicality, his size, all that stuff more than you care about what his 40 was, then you might be able to move down and get him, because he's not going to get drafted quite as high because of the 40. And it's weird but this has been studied. It's true that teams will overdraft for a 40. They will draft based on a 40. Kevin Cole, analytics guys, looked at this before about like players who rise, or he has done this, players who rise because of their 40s. And Benjamin Robinson and Grinding the Mocks does a good job at tracking like what draft analysts say. And if someone has a good 40, then their stock's going up. I mean, it's interesting that way, because the league shouldn't ever just look at a 40 and be like, oh yeah, okay, he ran really fast. But guys have been wildly overdrafted because of it at times. And maybe you think about Orlando Brown, his stock dropped significantly down to the third round as an offensive tackle, had a really good career as a left tackle, but he had a terrible combine. And that seemed to weigh, on his draft stock. Trash Boat says, betting odds. You guys have some great names. I don't even want to ask what that one's about. Betting odds have the Vikings as the lowest chance to win the division. Do you agree? More locker room motivation for KO to use this year. Yeah, I guess. I mean, last year he did the no one believes in us, but it was actually true. Like, no one did believe in them. And this year, I guess if it's McCarthy, he could still say that if they have the lowest betting odds. I mean, maybe 2 years in a row, the same message is a little tough to swing when they've been one of the biggest spenders. I don't think they should have the lowest betting odds. I think they should be second. The Packers is really a name only at this point. It's just they're the Packers, so they couldn't finish last, right? But also, quarterback uncertainty is always going to do this. That's what it was last year, and that's what it would be this year. Bradley says they're just too busy with the signings. I mean, every other team has run out their free agents for conversations. It's like, I don't know. I saw Kairos Tonga do a press conference. They can't be that busy. Look, I'm not mad about it. I'm just saying it's never been done this way before, and they've never been connected seriously to Aaron Rodgers before. I don't have to put on the tinfoil hat for this one. I'm just joking around with the call 1-800-PURPLE, because it's such a big conversation of where are these guys? Okay. Got a sponsor read for you. Want to continue answering questions. Also, intern Clay is standing by with headlines for today and questions to go by. But our sponsor for the show, Tempo Meals. Trying to keep myself, I mentioned earlier that $75 lunch. That's a lot. It's a lot out there. You know what's not a lot? Tempo Meals. Very easy to get your hands on. They are a weekly delivery service that delivers chef-crafted meals from a dietitian-approved menu fresh to your door. They have perfectly portioned lunches and dinners to take the guesswork out of eating and are fully prepared. You can heat them up in 3 minutes. So instead of driving someplace and spending your dough, right to your door, 3 minutes, and you're eating. I got another box the other day, got a Korean beef quesadilla, Tuscan butter shrimp, barbecue chicken, a lot of different options. But if you're not into all that football-y meat, if that's not your thing, lots of different options that are not, meat related. So all you need to do, just a couple of clicks, go to tempomeals.com/purple insider, 60% off your first box. That is tempomeals.com/purple insider for 60% off your first box. Rules and restrictions may apply. All right. Back to your questions. Kerpluppy shocked that they kept Kirk Cousins. Do you think they're betting someone will pick up his contract mid-season? I think that what they were waiting for, this is just a guess. Luckily, I haven't followed it that closely, which is nice, isn't it? And it does feel like what you're saying, though, could be accurate, where Kirk Cousins would refuse to waive his no trade clause until he got his bonus. And then dare them to cut him and take that huge cap hit. So then once he gets his $10 million bonus, great, I got my money. Now I'll waive his agent is a beast. His agent is welcome to operate this show and represent me anytime he wants. Mike McCarthy, what a monster. And I've asked people, other agents and think is that guy is he as good at his job as they say? Oh yeah. He's the guy. So playing chess with Atlanta and getting his bonus so then he can then accept a trade somewhere else. That seems to be how it's going. Taylor, I'll continue to make the Pro Bowl Tyler Huntley jokes. He's made one more recently than Rodgers. Okay, that's funny. That is funny. That's definitely funny. Tyler Huntley, fine. Yeah, I told you guys could talk me into pretty much any backup will be fine. Can't get Drew Lock. Have you seen the rapping videos? Yeah, that was when he was in Denver when he was playing. Drew Lock, I don't think is a problem. I haven't seen anything that would suggest to me. He came in for the Giants and played. He came in with Seattle a couple years ago, and I think he won a game or played well. All I need from a backup is if your quarterback is out for a month, step in and keep the train on the tracks, be able to still make the playoffs. James says, with the cap space available, what positions would you recommend to the Vikings brass that they solve now? Or would you prefer to put some cap space toward paying off some contracts early? Or just to carry it over to next year and help with the cap hits? This is another cap hack. You create a lot of space for this year. You push a lot of it into next year, which if you look at these contracts, there are big cap hits for Byron Murphy, for Will Fries, for Jonathan Allen, big cap hits for 2026. But if you carry over your cap space, then those cap hits become less, or restructures become easier, or whatever it might be, are more beneficial. That could be it. But if we're talking about what positions, the depth chart has been filled out pretty well here for starters. And that's why another wide receiver is on my radar and a corner would be on my radar. And there's some positions that really you can never have too many of them. Corner is definitely one. Defensive line is, maybe another rotational rusher. I know they have Dallas Turner, but if you get another guy who might be on the older side or something, or the left guard position, if they're waiting for some things to play out, the backup corner is going to cost some money, or backup quarterback is going to cost some money. So it'll get used. They won't let it just, Majal asks how much cap space do they need for draft picks and extra during the season? I would think for draft picks this year, it's not that much. It's probably 5, judging on where they're drafting, is probably like 5 to 7 million. And then during the season, I'd like to have 15 in case they make a big move. So maybe they spend half of this on a couple more players, a couple of more depth type of signings, older players who could come in and, uh, make a role, that kind of thing. So, Mr. Mayor, why was keeping Bradbury as a backup seemingly totally unconscionable to everyone in the Vikings media space? It's not like he was that expensive, right? Yeah, I think the reason is probably, this is just a guess, that I mean, you're right, they didn't make a huge amount of cap space for this year. So that is true. Probably that they like Michael Jurgens in that role as being their backup. And here's the other part of it too. As much as I have defended Bradbury throughout the years, and I think he improved under KOC, there was a stat that Nate Tice put out there that he had the worst rate of losses, and the eye test certainly matches up with this. One-on-one, the worst rate of losing one-on-one of anybody in the league. I mean, I think they just want to move on and look for guys who are going to be able to pass protect at that position. Ryan Kelly is a starter, and then Michael Jurgens, I think they're hoping is going to be better, but it's not hard to be better from where Bradbury was as a pass protector. He was legitimately one of the worst pass protectors in the league. Just just time to move on, let him go get another job and go from there. And the other thing is too that this team, they do stuff sometimes out of the culture, out of do what's right for the players, and they're not out here handing out participation trophies and stuff. And it's, they're playing football and they got to cut people sometimes that you don't necessarily want to cut. But at the same time, Garrett Bradbury could be a starter in the league. Someone will pick him up to start him. If you keep him here and then you keep him as a backup and you already have another guy that you like that's a backup, why not just let him move on? Get your few bucks of cap space, that kind of thing. I understand what you're saying. I'm not dismissing what you're saying. Like that happens all the time, and depth is important. And Ryan Kelly is also somebody that gets hurt. So I just think that they were so frustrated with the struggles in pass protection at the end of the year that it was just time to look for somebody else who can be more of a Ryan Kelly type of clone rather than having a totally different player have to pop in there. All those things could be the thing. False prophet is what type of corners fit Flores' scheme in the draft this year. I love Murphy, but he's not really a press man on an island corner. I don't think anybody really is anymore. When I look at the numbers for how often man coverage is played, there's only about 5 or 6 guys who are playing man coverage more than 40% of the time. The league has just gotten to the point where if you play man, they used to have that like cover 3 and that kind of thing, but it's gone away. If you play just man with most guys, they're going to use motion. They're going to use bunches. You're going to have these freak wide receivers who are great route runners. You're going to get toasted a lot of times in man coverage. So that's why most teams are playing in the zone. And there's a handful of guys, the DJ Reed, but they get penalized all the time too. If you play man a lot, you take a lot of penalties. So you got to be like Patrick Surtain. You got to be Jalen Ramsey. You got to be great at it. But I get what you're saying that he's not that way. I like Trey Amos. That's my favorite corner in this draft so far. Siobhan Ravel is another one who has maybe a high upside because of his athletic ability. He got hurt last year. That's somebody that they could look at. There are late first round guys that could be there. Amos, though, I mean, I don't look at any of these guys and go, whoa, he's a lockdown. Like Travis Hunter is the only guy in the draft who is that type. But I do like Amos because he's bigger. He makes plays on the football. He's played a lot and is a good tackler, kind of fits like the Brian Flores. But I think Flores is going to play zones. I think he's going to be more of a zone defense because that's what everybody is. So if you draft for that shutdown guy, and if he's not incredible and he's not good at playing zone, then you're actually kind of losing on that decision. It might be better to get guys who have played in zones. Jay says, what if they're waiting on the Packers to release Jair Alexander? I would not really be down with Jair Alexander, but maybe. Again, one of those, hey, if the guy kills you, then he's going to be somebody your team is looking at. Bring back Xavier Rhodes. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing is that, like Xavier Rhodes would not be as effective right now as he was years ago. He would still be really good, but not in the same way, because even in 2017, we're now separated quite a bit from 2017, and the league has changed stylistically, where he was islanding against Julio Jones, Antonio Brown. Those teams now would have had those guys going in motion all day, trying to get away from Xavier Rhodes. They'd be lining up in bunches, different splits. I mean, they did some of that stuff, but now it's to the extreme. Like, remember what happened in 17? The Rams came in and ran motion on like every play, and they ran those fake jet sweeps all the time, and they messed with the league, and then everybody copied it after that. And that made it so much harder on cornerbacks to just be that type of line it up and be that guy. Should the Vikings bring back Jaren Hall? You guys love bringing back people. Jaren Hall to me was not an NFL quarterback. He handled himself really professionally, but from what I saw from his practice and the time that he started, it was just going too fast for him. Bring back Teddy. Okay, we're going to need some funnier bring back answers. I mean, Taylor Heineke might be a funny answer. I know he signed. Wes Lunt, Danny Etling, Case Cook is obviously the funniest answer. Maybe you could go Bubby Brister. Todd Bauman had a minute there. There's a lot of funny answers of who to bring back if you want to throw some in there. Thielen next year, that's good. I'm not working on another book at the moment. We just had free agency. Tom Compton to the rescue, yeah. Let's see. Nubelax says, is JJ McCarthy not going to be ready or already a bust or something? Why haven't we come out and supported him as the day one start? It's a great question. I will be sure to ask it when I get the opportunity. I mean, Caleb asked something along the same lines. Do you think that they're not as high on McCarthy as they make it seem? I don't know. What is your gut feeling? I mean, if they're considering Aaron Rodgers, the reason that they would be doing it is because Kevin O'Connell would look at Rodgers and watch his tape from last year and say, if he was with me and he was with Jefferson and we had the offense that we have now and the offensive line, that we can win a Super Bowl. I don't think that an Aaron Rodgers decision would be about JJ McCarthy. Everything that I have heard and seen in front of my face on McCarthy in training camp has all said that they love what he brought to the table. Last year, behind the scenes, his attitude, his work ethic, all of that. I mean, I think about the first test. A lot of times I can get a lot from a young player. Just their first test, do they pass it? And one of the first tests is always, how do they come back from OTAs? Because they get there and they're all excited. We're in the NFL now. And then they do OTAs and minicamp and those meetings. And they're like, oh man, that was a lot. Do you come back prepared for training camp and put in the work ethic? Or do you kind of go on vacation, hang out, and not really look at your playbook? JJ McCarthy and his improvement during that time said a lot about what he's going to be. And then how much he improved during training camp, how he led the team. There is and this comes from college and you've seen it. Everyone's talked about it. Like, he has a vibe to him that people really like and that teammates respond really well to, all that stuff. The only thing I don't know, so I can tell you all that they are that high on all of that. The way he threw the football, the velocity with which he threw the football, the accuracy improved, the day-to-day, how he responded from mistakes, like all that stuff. They loved all that stuff. The only thing I don't know is the knee. That, Kevin O'Connell has said that the knee is fine and the recovery is fine, but I don't have his charts. Somebody wants to bring it out to me, I can take a look at it, but I don't know that. I think it's more about Rodgers and less about McCarthy, because they still know that they're going to have 2 more years. And this is if they did it, that they're going to have 2 more years of his rookie deal. So kid, wait 1 more year for this opportunity of a lifetime for 1 year to go and play with Aaron Rodgers and give it a shot, right? That would be the explanation. I don't think it's about not feeling excited about JJ McCarthy. General Soreness, how long can the league fart around before announcing a suspension for Addison? It's not the league. It's Addison. He has continued to, I should say his lawyers. He's not doing this. They've continued to bump back court dates, and they had some sort of date. Now you're testing my memory from what Kevin Seifert reported, but there was some sort of recent date that was set for them to have a pre-date trial thing or whatever. They take forever, this stuff. And sometimes lawyers know how to drag it out until it disappears, but we'll see. So it's not the league. It's going to be, they're going to wait. And this is precedent. They did this with the last player who was suspended for DUI was on the Saints, and the league waited until that player, there was a ruling, and then they suspended him for 3 games. So it's going to be probably still some time there. Son of Beavers, could you see CJ Mosley as some veteran depth? Yeah, I think so. He's that type of player. That's what I mean about maybe we have reached the point where they will wait on other signings. And after May 1st, and you guys are going to love this, after May 1st, I believe you don't have to give up comp picks after May 1st. So sometimes that's when these signings happen, is we'll get that mini camp signing where we go, oh yeah, they brought that guy in during mini camp. And sometimes it's just because it's after that deadline where you don't have to do the the comp pick thing. So they could wait on somebody like that for a little bit longer. And that might be one of the reasons to just hang around with the salary cap space, is to just make sure that that guy who's still out there in May or before training camp, that you could sign him. Or in the case of somebody like Stephon Gilmore, deep into training camp because he didn't want to come to camp and he was staying in shape at his house or whatever. Let's see. Freaker be the speaker. That's a good one. What's the thought process of why KOC even wants Rodgers and his cancer in the locker room? I think with Rodgers, I don't think that he is like the worst teammate or something. It's just that it's always something with him. It's the circus in town, the number of interviews and stuff that he does, his explanations for everything, that it's just always kind of causing some type of drama. My understanding from where he fit last year was not that he was a bad teammate. It was more of just, it's always going on. You can never escape it. It weighs on everybody. And he's just not good enough for it to do that anymore. I mean, when he's winning the MVP, you don't care, but when he's not winning the MVP, you do. And you can't tell me that this wasn't part of, and I know there was some drama with like Deflategate and stuff, but you can't tell me this wasn't part of the Brady and his success, is that it just was never a thing with Brady. I know Deflategate, and they would try to make a thing out of Brady sometimes, but like, it wasn't like this. It wasn't like endless headlines. And Rodgers is a political figure, like it or not. He's a political figure at this point. It just brings way more to the party than you're ever going to have with any other quarterback, because he's gone past, he has transcended just some guy in a locker room. That's what I'd be more concerned about than how he actually acts inside the locker room, because I think he's probably just a regular football player when he's there. But even then, I don't know. There's been some strange stories there. So Ty DeSkull says, with Kelly's injury history, do you think the Vikings will draft a center? Or should they draft a center? They might draft somebody with positional flexibility, like a guard/center. But I think Juergens is the guy that they like. And so he'll probably be the backup. And if he can be like a Mason Cole or something, or an Austin Schlottman that can fill in, yeah, you'll be fine there. Matt, you're funny. If Chris Thomason was here, he'd be knocking on Kwesi's door. That's funny. Chris is a dogged reporter. There's no doubt about that. No doubt about that. Good friend and dogged reporter. Is Will Johnson sliding? Evan asks. Thought he was a top 10 pick. Doesn't seem that way now. Yeah, it doesn't seem that way now. Now that, of course, always depends. Like who you buy. Like if the draft analysts are not as high on Will Johnson because he didn't go to the combine and do his workouts because he's got an injury. Is that what happened? Right? If that's that might hurt his stock on the outside world. It might not hurt his stock inside the league. Like, stocks falling and rising are kind of an invention from the outside. Mostly, right? I mean, in the league, they've been scouting these guys for 2 years. So they're not coming in and going, you know what? I think the combine will have this magic effect sometimes if somebody goes nuts and there's maybe 2 or 3 players a year, or a late round player who everyone thought wasn't a good athlete and suddenly was, or a Matthew Golden who everyone thought was maybe pretty fast and then it turns out he's insanely fast. Things like that. Things like that will happen. But for the most part, the league has figured out a lot of their draft stuff and is having draft meetings and all that and solidifying their board. And then it's kind of on the outside who hears one thing that this guy's rising, this guy's falling. So I don't know, but it doesn't seem like there's as much hype on Will Johnson as there was. So that could be somebody the Vikings look at. I shot you 99 with a super chat. Tip of the cap for that. Really appreciate that. If the Vikings are this gun shy about starting McCarthy, just call Jim Harbaugh and trade a first round pick for Justin Herbert. Yeah. Now, the Vikings did make that call last year, reportedly. They did make that call about Herbert, and they were told, nah, we're good. Justin Herbert's pretty good at football. We'll see if they can build enough around him, but he's not a guy that you move on from. He's what you're hoping McCarthy becomes, where if you get good enough coaching and you get a good enough supporting cast, that he is going to have you in the playoffs every year. And one of those times it's going to work. I tend not to really believe, and I'm sure there's some of it, but history just tells me not to believe this guy can't win in the playoffs. This guy can't get it done. I mean, do you know how bad Eli Manning was in his first couple starts? And then he turns out to be Mr. Clutch. So I think they'll just keep, I've always looked at it this way. Now you've got me into this thing. There's Brady, there's Manning, there's Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen. The best 3 or 4 quarterbacks of a generation will get 10 shots at winning a Super Bowl. They'll be so good every year that they're going to have every single season, they're going to be deep in the playoffs. They're just going to be there because they're that good. And that's how this sport works. The next level down will have maybe 5. Eli won 2 of his. Matt Stafford won his one. Like, that's a quarterback who gets 5 shots at the Super Bowl on a good team. I know Stafford didn't have a good team, but Joe Burrow is a guy that's going to get 5 shots at a Super Bowl, right? In his career. He made one already. He'll probably make another one at some point, but he's not flawless. That's where Herbert lives. That's where most quarterbacks who are really good live. That's where if JJ McCarthy gets to, you've had a majorly successful draft pick and you're kind of looking for, because I mean, icon is unlikely. So that's what you're kind of looking for. Does this guy give you 5 shots to win a Super Bowl? I think Herbert will eventually with Jim Harbaugh, which is why they won't trade him. That's the point. Wally says PFF had them at 7 in their power rankings for early post free agency. Yeah. I mean, you're talking about the odds. I don't think I really maybe went far enough into that, because I think that the Vikings belong in second place in the odds right now. First of all, the Bears got to prove it. Their quarterback got sacked 68 times last year. They got to prove it. They shouldn't have any odds higher than it, but they did this last year. They love the Bears. They always do. They always overrate the Bears in Vegas every year. And as far as the Packers, they just haven't done a whole heck of a lot in this free agency to make a difference. And if they're running the same roster, then it's probably a 10-win roster or 11-win roster for them, which is okay. But then, things got to go right. Sean says, any chance we could get a 2nd and maybe a 5th for Addison? There's really no reason to trade Jordan Addison. I think you guys just like trades. I know, because I do this on Madden too. When I get a team, what do you think the first thing I do is? I sim the season, I tank, put the punter at quarterback, and then what do I do when I get to the offseason? I trade for all sorts of people. But I'm not trading Jordan Addison for draft picks. He's got 2 years left on his rookie deal, and he's really good. A 900-yard receiver who could go down the field and track the ball like that is worth $20 million in the NFL. How much better? T. Higgins is a great receiver. How much better is T. Higgins than Jordan Addison? Maybe he's $5 million better? I mean, he's going to make 28 a year. Like, this is a valuable thing. Receiver on a rookie contract is like a quarterback on a rookie contract at this point. So you did not a good idea to go trading people like that. I should bring in Clay here in a minute. Clay has been waiting very patiently with all of his questions, but you guys have had so many uh, great questions here. But Clay has been gathering headlines from the day and different things happening around the NFL. So let me bring him into the mix and I'll continue to answer questions. Intern Clay at Penn, we'll see if we get some sirens tonight in the background, or we'll start the counter on how long it will be. But how we doing, Clay? What's going on, man?
I'm good. I'm kind of a little flustered at your T. Higgins Jordan Addison comparison because I'm very high on T. Higgins, but I'll just let that slide.
Well, the question is not, is T. Higgins better? Because I think T. Higgins is better. It's how many dollars better. And the
Exactly.
point is, let's say T. Higgins is a $28 million wide receiver. What does that make Jordan Addison? Probably like a $20 million wide receiver, of which they're paying five for the next 2 years, or five-ish as a first round pick for the next 2 years. So you really don't want to be moving players that give you that much surplus cap space. That was the comparison. That's the most recent wide receiver contract. But his catch against the Vikings, where he went up and caught it and then fell into the end zone, was one of the coolest things I have ever seen in person. Bring back Jerry Ball. That's a really good one. I'm just catching up to the chat where you guys are. Bring back Corbin Lucina. I've met Corbin Lucina. He's a former Bill. Visante Shenko. Okay. Willie Beavers. Some great names here. Matt Castle, Sean Salisbury, John David Booty, Gino Toretta, Demetrius Underwood, too soon. Daryl Talley. A lot of great names for you guys. Todd Bauman is a good one. John David Booty is definitely the right answer for this. Anyway, I'm wasting your time, Clay. So you've put together some moves that have happened and some headlines and some questions. So where would you like to begin with Clay's corner for this evening?
Yeah, I think the biggest news is with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. They finally have been locked up into long-term contracts. So, how do these deals compare to the Justin Jefferson one that he signed last year?
Well, I think it's pretty clear that any contract that was signed last year now looks good. I've seen this from 20 different reporters, and I've said it too. Like, wow, that contract they did with that guy last year now looks good, which is how it usually works. But this year was unusual in how much the cap went up. And I think that Jamar Chase probably had a sense for this, because I also saw, well, if they had only done it last year, and you're like, the player has to agree. Jamar Chase was going to bet on himself the same way Jefferson was. The Vikings were criticized for not getting Jefferson's deal done a year early, but I think Jefferson never really wanted to sign. Yes, it is Ivy League pen for Clay. Yeah, that's correct. University of Pennsylvania. But I think that those guys never wanted to sign, knowing that the cap would go up, knowing that they could use their leverage, and that they ultimately did. But when it comes to Darisaw and Jefferson, yes, those are the two best players on the whole team. And they got both of them locked up long term last year. And I'm sure if you're Jefferson, you're a little agitated, because not only did Jamar Chase get more money, he kind of got a lot more money than Justin Jefferson did. But that's not really the goal if you're the Vikings, to make sure he's got the biggest number. It's to have him locked up long term. And I remember talking about this and saying, hey, it's going to be fine. At the point that they sign him, it'll seem like a lot, but then a year from now it won't. And here we are. And now 2-3 years, there'll be more receivers that come along and it'll look great at that point. So I think that the Vikings have a really good contract for one of the best players on their team.
Yeah, it's a toss up really when it comes to who's better between Jefferson and Chase. So when it's that close, then you could come out of that paying one of them 5 million less. Like Vikings fans are happy about that. So I do think the Bengals got good value on T. Higgins, though. I know it's 28 mil for a number two receiver, but we're talking about a guy who had 900 yards and 10 touchdowns in just 12 games, and he's the number two receiver. So you put him in a different offense, and I think he takes off and is probably a top 3 or 4 guy in the whole league. So by keeping him in the room is really big for them. But we talking about like looking back on contracts made last year, I think the Texans are smiling right now. Looking at that Nico Collins deal, locking him up for 24 million. And me personally, I think Nico Collins is comfortably the third best receiver in the league. So I think they're smiling over that one.
I think that they won't be able to throw him the ball because they traded for Ed Ingram and got rid of Laramie Tunsil, and CJ Stroud is going to be too injured to throw the football to Nico Collins. But maybe there's some last second guys that they can bring in. Yeah, good point though. I mean, Higgins and getting what he got is probably a little bit less than he would have gotten if he had ended up on the free agent market for next year, but he has been banged up a little. And if I'm him, I just want Joe Burrow to keep throwing me the football, and that will be good for life. But if you're the Vikings, what you would have preferred is that T. Higgins was traded to a team that they don't play next year, because the Vikings play Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. Who would be your pick in an all-player draft between Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson?
I think I'm taking Jamar Chase. I think it's pretty close, but it's just he has that extra gear, which is he moves differently. And I think Justin Jefferson as like a receiver is probably better, but when you count in the athleticism and just that the extra tick, I think Jamar Chase has it. But it's super close. Like I have no complaints over Justin Jefferson at all.
I think that Chase is kind of like Tyreek Hill in that route running and details and even contested catches are not his absolute strength, but he's so freaking fast that he just get the ball in his hands and he's going to make a big play. Whereas Jefferson, I think, is more of a pure wide receiver. His route running, his details, his ball tracking. I mean, they're all the best. I mean, either way, it's a coin flip, and the numbers would say it's a coin flip. Something that happened last year, though, and CD Lamb is also in this conversation as well when Cooper Rush isn't throwing in the ball, when he's on point with Dak Prescott. But something that happened last year is Jefferson and Chase were way above everybody else. It was like those two were the only two that were completely dominating the NFL for wide receivers. It was not a huge year for wide receivers. There weren't a ton of guys that got 1,500 plus yards, and yet these two were way above the rest. So I think that there's something to be said for where they stand in the league ahead of everybody else. So Nublax says JJ is better than Moss. He could do everything. Yeah, I don't know if you watched Moss, if you're going to say that. I would not.
Moss is the only dude I've ever seen that just stands straight up in his stance, and then he's 99 miles an hour on his first step. So I don't know.
Randy Moss is like one of the three best players to ever play wide receiver. I mean, we got a factor for era where I know I just said those two are head and shoulders above everyone else. Randy Moss was 50 miles above everybody else at that time. I mean, Randy Moss changed the franchise forever, changed the league forever, changed the way the Packers drafted. I mean, this guy is like one of the put him on Mount Rushmores of all time great non-quarterback players. I mean, this is a different level to Randy Moss than it is for Justin Jefferson. But maybe if you've only seen like some Moss highlights or something, because if you think that he was just one dimensional, then you really didn't watch Randy Moss, because he could do anything. So anyway, and the 1 year that Tom Brady plays with him, he has the most touchdowns ever. They go undefeated. I mean, anywho, what else we got?
Yep. So next up, Derek Stingley re-signed with the Texans, and he's now the highest paid corner. With the cornerback market rising, should the Vikings prioritize drafting a corner early on in this year's draft?
So I think that this argument can be made for a couple different positions. It certainly can be made at defensive tackle with the prices. It can be made at guard with the prices, and it can be made at corner with how much these guys are getting paid. But I would say to some extent, the answer is yes. I mean, if you're drafting guys and developing them and they're getting 30 million, I mean, that's a lot of surplus cap space if you draft someone who's successful. I also think that there's a lot of corners and they're everywhere, and you can always go get them. You can always go get a Shaq Griffin or something, but what you can't get is excellence anywhere. And Stingley, the point about him isn't as much the price tag. It's the fact that these guys don't make it to the market. Patrick Surtain doesn't make it to the market. Everybody here wants Sauce Gardner. I wish you the best of luck. He's going to re-sign with the Jets. Unless he's got some personal problem, he's going to sign with the Jets. And Stingley's going to stay with his team. You can't go into free agency and build cornerback rooms. You can get Byron Murphys. You can get Stephon Gilmore's at 50 years old, but you can't get like defense changing type of corners without drafting them. And I would look to the draft this year at corner if they're not going with a starting left guard. And if they don't have, if they have a huge gap, okay, sure. But that's why I like Trey Amos, the guy from Ole Miss. I think he's on the bigger side, looks to me like a Brian Flores type player, looks like a high IQ player. And I definitely like Jahadi Barron, who I think would be a great, great fit for Brian Flores, but he looks like he's going to go a little bit higher than that. So I think that's what the main point is, that if you want somebody good at that position, you better draft them because they're not hitting free agency.
Yeah, these contracts are just getting so ridiculous. Like the Stingley one makes sense. He's a top corner. But when I saw JC Horn get paid, whatever he got paid, I'm still confused on how he convinced them to give him all that money. But
well, you can't be letting anybody who's good out of the doors if you're Carolina, right? You're on the rebuild. You got to overpay somebody to stay with you.
Yeah, that is true. But I think the Vikings, I think since they filled so many holes this free agency, especially on both sides of the interior, I think it does allow them to open up and think more about corner with that first round pick and plugging him next to Byron Murphy, whose contract looks good now that the dust has all settled. I think it would be a good move for them.
There's a few guys that are interesting. False Prophet mentions, is it Darian Porter for Iowa State? And who's the other one? Will Johnson, if he drops. Like, there are some guys who sort of have my attention. Hairston, who ran he ran like a 4.29 or 4.3 something, just something crazy. But I also agree with VA Viking 33, says the draft this year is a best player available because they have a really good team. I agree with that. And corner might be the only position where I see, other than left guard, and maybe they'll fill that out, that I see where I could go, you could draft a starter. And that's nothing against Mekhi Blackman, who was good 2 years ago, but he's coming off an ACL injury, and you have Murphy as a starter, and you have Isaiah Rodgers, who they signed. I can't just say Rodgers. Isaiah Rodgers, who they signed in free agency. And then what? It would be nice for them, as far as their depth chart goes, to be able to bring in a top draft pick corner who you could plan to start and then have contingency plans if you can.
Yeah, I think it's always nice to be in a position where you could draft the best player available and not force a pick and try and reach. So I think the Vikings, it's going to be really hard for them to mess up the draft. Like, whether you stay and pick best player or you trade back. And I feel like there's a lot of good options for them this year in the draft. But for my next headline, I want to talk about Cooper Kupp. He signed with the Seahawks, and Seattle has completely rebranded that offense. So is Sam Darnold going to creep back into the playoffs next year? What's going to happen?
I think that division is tough. See, the way that you would play it out right now, and we're so close to the season that we have all the answers, right? Only April, May, June, July, August. So only 6 months away. But if you were trying to project it post free agency, just how the NFC is going to look if things go the way we think they're going to go, I mean, you could pretty reasonably put 2 NFC North teams in the playoffs and 2 NFC East teams in the playoffs, probably one from the South and probably one from the West. Is that one from the West going to be Seattle? Well, if Matthew Stafford is still really good and has no problems and is healthy, the Rams are going to make the playoffs, because I don't think Arizona is there yet. And San Francisco is just taking it all down, taking their medicine with their salary cap and so forth. But if you're talking about Seattle's chances, it really hinges on Stafford. If he falls off, even if they got Devontae Adams, even if they have a great team, they were one game away from potentially missing the playoffs last year. If he gets hurt or whatever, then I think Seattle is good enough to make it. But everything about Seattle screams to me 9-8, 10-7, just one of those teams in the league. And this is why you draft your JJ McCarthy, because you want to be more than a team in the league, and you want to be able to spend and get players here and make a trade if you have to and that kind of thing. I think he's going to be fine, and I think that team's going to be fine. I don't think they're going to be any different than when Geno was there, which is they're competitive. And if you got to go to Seattle and play them, which, wait, do the Vikings go to Seattle? Of course they do, right? Next year, I think they do. I think they go to Seattle. And yeah, it's not going to be easy. You're not going to just go to Seattle and beat Geno Smith out there last year. It took a lot. But they're not really a seriously contending team, even with Cooper Kupp. I think he probably wanted to go back to where he played college And I think he may be from that area too. That might have played into it, and money played into it. But it's still, until the Cardinals prove it, it's a 2-team race, and it's between Seattle and the Rams, and maybe they can make it.
Yeah, I feel like the Seahawks made a bunch of moves, but still stayed kind of the exact same. Like they won 10 games last year, but at no point in the league did I think they were going to go win a playoff game last year. Like, yeah, they were just the definition of mid to me. So even after all these moves and reshaping how that offense is going to look, nothing changes if that O-line doesn't improve. They have one of the worst units in the league, and all they've done so far to improve it is sign Josh Jones. And he's what? I don't even know who that is. I looked him up on PFF. He's 132 out of 141 tackles graded. Not a good look. So until they fix that line, I don't really see anything changes except 8 to 10 wins.
Right. And Sam Darnold will be used to that for sure. He'll be used to having to scramble around and make some plays and so forth. But yeah, it's just, and I'm not really sold on their coach. I mean, their coach got him to 10 wins, but he was the first time head coach out there, and some of their stuff seemed relatively basic. They hired Clint Kubiak, who Vikings fans are familiar with for not being a good play caller. And then who knows if he was going to be last year in New Orleans before, Derek Carr got hurt, and then it wasn't, there was no chance there with Spencer Rattler and so forth. But just totally mid team that needs to draft offensive line, and maybe they'll build around Sam for a couple of years and see what happens there. Based on his contract, it seems like if he struggles, they might move on. So I don't know. Yep. But him signing there seemed like him deciding he would prefer the money and to be closer to home than actually pick a contender, which is fine. I mean, he's had his Super Bowl, and at that point you could just decide whatever you want to do. But he didn't go to the Chiefs. He didn't go to another team that's going to be top 5. He went to more of just another team in the league at this point.
Yeah. So another quarterback we're talking about is Kirk Cousins, because he's still on the Falcons roster. And I don't remember anything like this, but you're much older than I am. So have you seen a situation like this before, where a team whiffs on a highly paid quarterback and then they keep him as a backup?
I'm sure that I have. I have to think about that. Maybe the chat can help with that. Well, yeah, I'm thinking about Jimmy Garoppolo and how Garoppolo was supposed to be the backup for Trey Lance, but then he ended up not being because Trey Lance was bad. But he was the backup to start that season. So I think that's probably the most recent answer that I can give you, is that he was the backup to start that season with Trey Lance. And then Lance played in the Mud Bowl with Chicago, and then he got hurt, and then it was Jimmy Garoppolo again, and they still ended up in the NFC Championship with Jimmy Garoppolo. So that was weird. Yeah, throughout history, there has been a handful of times where some veteran quarterback who had been there a long time got benched. I mean, I know it was due to injury, but even Dak Prescott taking the job away from Tony Romo, and he was the backup there during what would have been the 2016 season. But aside from that, I mean, for somebody to get that type of contract and then a year later have the potential, I still think Kirk's going to find his way out of there to another team, but still have the potential to be sitting on the bench, making $45 million a year with $100 million guaranteed, and having played 14 games and sit and watch Michael Penix is a wild outcome. And this was exactly on draft night why I thought this is a great move for them, because to draft Michael Penix, it's funny, but it's a great move because you just don't know how long Kirk Cousins was going to hold up with his leg issue. And last year, he may have gotten a little stronger in the Achilles as the season went along, but not in the arm. And then he comes out and says, well, I had an elbow injury. It's like, I'm pretty sure that just, you can't really throw with any velocity anymore. Yeah, people are reacting to you calling me old. It's definitely the case now. There is some point where half of the draft is guys' sons who you watched play. Like we're talking about Asante Samuel Jr. is on his second contract. And once you've reached that point, it's like, okay, well, I watched Asante Samuel. He was like a young player in my mind compared to the guys that I grew up watching. So yeah, it's perfectly acceptable. Manning getting benched for Osweiler and then getting his job back. Yeah, that might have been kind of a fake injury thing, or he may have been banged up. There's Trent Green staying on the bench after Kurt Warner, I guess. Could be. Not, I don't know if there's anything quite like this though, because Kirk was not hurt at all. And they just did it for purely performance.
Yeah, I think it's a unique situation that would only work with Kirk Cousins. Like normally when you have two quarterbacks that really believe they can start and lead a team, it's not good for the locker room. But Kirk is just like, he's the nicest dude in the world. He's Kirk. Like, yeah, he's not like, yeah, he's on the bench, but I don't think he's going to try and ruffle any feathers while he's there. His agent is going to do his thing on the back end, but Kirk's going to be Kirk. So I don't think it's really ruffling any feathers. And I think that's why they're letting it linger on and just see if they can find a trade partner once these teams get desperate.
I think Kirk, knowing that he's got his money, will be okay with it if that's the case. But I think the thing about this situation, the way it's played out for Kirk, is that he wanted to have a team that loved him and invested in him. And that was really what he told us before he left his last press conference, was that, and the thing I've quoted a million times from him is he said, it's not about the money, it's what the money represents. Like he wanted a team to fully buy into him and for him to be their guy for the next 4 years. And here we go. And, that just didn't happen. Like from day one, they draft somebody else. They didn't tell him until the last minute. And then now they're not even going to give him a chance to compete against Penix in training camp. It's just going to be, this is Penix's team going forward, which to me says they're trying to get a trade for him. And I think that will ultimately happen, but I mean, I don't know. It could just be super awkward. Yeah, you're getting roasted for calling me old, folks. I promise you that
I don't make the rules. I'm just an observer.
I promise you that I've gotten past the point where I would be.
It's our back and forth. Just let us live.
I would not be offended by that. Maybe more experienced and knowledgeable about the history of the National Football League, Clay. You're trying to catch up with that. So I don't know. We'll see how it plays out with Kirk. I think he's going to be a Cleveland Brown or something eventually. Going to work his way there. What else you got?
All right. I had a backup quarterback question, but I think we're past that. I think you guys touched on that. So
okay, who do you want? Who do you think the Vikings should want as a backup quarterback?
I think you guys should want Joe Flacco, probably just as safe, calm, won't say too much, like all reliable. That's what you want for a young quarterback to have behind him. But if not, it's like, what are your other options besides Jameis? Like you don't want to have an undrafted free agent, young guy in there. Like you're going to find somebody. And I agree with what you said earlier. Like at this point, it doesn't really matter who it is. Just get a guy back there and don't cause any problems.
Brennan, really thinking ahead here, wants to know, I love questions like this in March. Who's returning punts? And Brennan, I am not making fun of you. Like I'm serious. If you're that football, then you get like extra Purple Insider bonus points. Or exactly, you get the round of applause. Like Brendan's sitting here in March being like,
he's loyal. He's locked
who's going to return punts? And again, nothing but respect for that question. I don't know the answer to that question. They don't have anybody right now. And they might get Rondale Moore. He was visiting another team. I just think Brandon Powell is done as a Viking, just fell off last year, wasn't the same. So they will have to go and find one. They might have a punt returner competition. It's something that you can find a little bit later. Steve mentions Devin Duvernay. Like you can find those guys later or have a competition. But as of right now, they do not have a punt returner. So that is on the list. Yeah, Flacco's fine. As long as he is going to be nice to JJ McCarthy and he could, I don't know if he can win 2 games out of 4 though. He looked really cooked last year. Not how he looked against the Browns, but even then, or when he was with the Browns and got him to the playoffs, but even then, I'm not sure he was actually great. I think that they had a really, really good team. So I don't know. Yeah. Aaron Rodgers will be the backup. By week 6, you never know. By week 6, maybe.
Yeah, with his ego. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Come be the backup. It'll be all fine.
Son of Beaver says, this is again, you like so football-y. Drew Bledsoe is the backup. Worst move of the offseason is bringing back Ryan Wright. Yeah, but I mean, they can have competition. They can have competition for Ryan Wright. They signed, what was it, like a $1.7 million deal? They'll bring in somebody to compete with Ryan Wright. He was not he was not great, but I also don't think he was terrible. Last year, it was fine. I don't know. What else you got?
All right. For my last one, I know free agency isn't all the way completely finished, but as it's wrapping up, I want to get your initial post free agency power rankings. Who are your top 5 at this point of the year?
So we're talking top 5, all teams,
Mm-hmm.
like power ranking, traditional power ranking style.
Yep.
And not just the winners of free agency. Well, okay. So clearly the number one team has to be the Philadelphia Eagles. They did not lose a lot. They've lost a little, Milton Williams, they brought in some guys and somehow they keep getting all these comp picks. You guys should go cheer for the Eagles. You love your comp picks. I'm just kidding about that. Eagles fans, if they saw you, would throw batteries at your face. But the Eagles have to be number one. Number 2 is a tough question because I don't think the Buffalo Bills have gained a crazy amount of talent. They got another wide receiver. They got 2 guys who got 6-game suspensions. Imagine signing 2 guys. Were they together? Did they do PEDs on the visit on the free agent? Like, how did that happen?
And they knew about one of them. They're like,
why not? Right. Yeah. Why not? I still think Buffalo was a stronger team than Kansas City last year. It just didn't work out that way. Baltimore would also be in the conversation for me there. So it'd probably be Baltimore hasn't lost anything, but hasn't gained anything either, but they were a great team last year. So I might go Eagles, then Ravens, Bills. Now, do we go Chiefs there? It's hard to knock off the Chiefs. They had a bad team and finished 15-2. And one of them was on purpose. So really 15-1. But the Chiefs, I don't know that they're going to get a lot better from where they were last year with their issues with the cap, and they've let some players go. I want to say Commanders with Laramie Tunsil belong in this discussion, and then the Lions. So the thing is about you can't take the Chiefs out of the top 5. They were just in the Super Bowl, and they were in the Super Bowl before that, and they were in the Super Bowl before that. You just can't take them out of your top 5. So I'm struggling my way through it because I want to include the Lions, who have not gotten worse, but have definitely get better by getting Aiden Hutchinson back. And they've kept a lot, and they got DJ Reed. So I got to have the Eagles there. I got to have the Lions and the Ravens, Bills, and Chiefs, I think. And someone's got to be left out. Maybe it's the Commanders have to be left out for now.
Yeah, we have a very similar list. I had to put the Eagles at 1, 2. I still believe they have the best roster, and they have 8 picks in this year's draft. So I think they're only going to get better. And Jalen Hurts proved to everybody that he's an elite quarterback now. So as long as he continues to perform, this team will be in good shape. And then number 2, I had the Ravens just because of that Lamar and Derrick Henry combo. It's just you can't rate them any lower with that. It's like they're 2 most deadliest runners on the planet, and they're in the same backfield. So I think if they go up, I feel like every offseason it's like if they go get a number 1 receiver, it's like we'll see what happens at pick 27. But I think either way, they're going to be contenders. And then again, Bills number 3. Added Joey Bosa. We'll see if that really does anything. But I feel like they always lose by just a few plays. So I think them and Baltimore really need to take advantage of this potential Kansas City fall off. But at 4, I have the Chiefs because Patrick Mahomes is still playing football. As long as he's there, they're going to be top 5 for me. He could win a Super Bowl regardless of the circumstances. And I'm not sure if or what or when Rice's suspension will be, but if he's back for playoff time and they can get rolling, they're going to be the scariest offense going into the playoffs with him, Worthy, and even an aging Kelsey. So, and then my 5.
I like that you already made it to the playoffs for next year. I was making fun of earlier, like being 6 months ahead. You are like 11 months ahead.
I feel like there's certain teams where we just know they're going to be there.
Yeah. As long as Mahomes is healthy. So here's a question. Did you say number 5? Who your number 5 was?
5 was my interesting one. I have the Rams.
Okay.
They dealt with a lot of injuries and barely made the playoffs because of it, but they got hot and they started rolling and they were close. They put up the best fight against the Eagles. So, and now they have Devontae Adams. I know they lost Cooper Kupp, but Adams is different. So I think they'll be up there.
I mean, it's hard to hate on that when they were a drive away from beating the Philadelphia Eagles. And they were the only team that played with the Eagles. They're really a handoff away. Just don't fumble a handoff in the snow. And you're right there. They have the sickest D-line, which we know travels pretty well. They have the best coaching, and certainly Sean McVay put on some sort of demonstration against the Minnesota Vikings about how to be a playoff coach. So I don't mind that pick. I think the Commanders and Rams are probably close, and right there with them is the Vikings. That this maybe your area of 6, 7, 8, 5, 6, 7. There's a very clear top in the AFC, and then everybody's fighting to get into that conversation. Like the Bengals, I think the Bengals would be a playoff team. I don't know if I could put them in the top 5 without making major changes to their defense or offensive line. Kind of looks like a team that's going to have the same problems as last year. And in the NFC, Dallas hasn't done a thing. You can't really put them back. The Packers, are going to be a good team, but can they be a great team? They kind of have the same roster as last year, and they're just hoping that Jordan Love is a little more healthy. But if they haven't really changed much, it's hard to set the bar any higher. So I think that there's a jockeying after a very clear top 4 or maybe 5, but then there's a lot of teams that you could make the case for. I like it. We should have you power rank more stuff going forward. So you'll be back on Thursday night for sure. I know tomorrow I will definitely have a podcast episode. I don't know about live. Oh no, actually tomorrow night I'm hosting on WCCO radio tomorrow night. So if you are an AM radio listener or stream live, I will be hosting on CCO tomorrow night. So check that out. But here on the channel, my conversation, I'm going to interview Sam Monson from Check the Mic, formerly of PFF, tomorrow. So anyway, thank you, Clay, for your time. As always, sir, I will see you on Thursday. Appreciate you. We had no background noise today, no audio issues, no sirens, no cops. We did well.
Look at us.
Start to finish. We knew you could do it. Okay.
Who would have thought?
Yeah, I know. Exactly. Well, thank you for your time. And thank you all for listening. Make sure you go check out, I wrote a column today about young quarterbacks thriving in the NFL and why that to me says that you don't need to go get Aaron Rodgers. PurpleInsider.football is the newsletter. It's a great way to support the show. Only a couple bucks a month, few bucks a year, and keeps the show going, keeps me traveling to the owners' meetings, to the combine, to road games, all those things. And you get an email almost every single day where it's my writing. So tomorrow I'm simulating the draft and I'll have a full analysis of that. So PurpleInsider.football, make sure you check that out. And we will definitely catch you very soon. Anything happens in the league with the Vikings and you know who or whatever, there will be a live show for that. So thanks everybody as always. And we will see you soon. Football.